everyone! How is your wonderful day going? Is it going good, bad? Well, no matter what, I hope you're getting through it. Welcome back to the Just Justine Time Podcast, where we talk about psychology topics, conspiracy theories, mental illness, anything you can think about in the branch of psychology. I'm your girl. This week has been pretty crazy. It is snowing so much outside to the fact that it is just a winter wonderland, like a whiteout. I know right now it's like blizzarding. Gotta love the joys of winter in Canada. But Christmas is right around the corner, and that is what's taken me through it. Even though I'm Canadian, I absolutely hate the cold. I wish I lived in like Bora Bora, where it's just nice and warm all the time, all year round. But no, I have to live where it's cold. But at least Christmas is my favorite season, so it makes up for winter because I love all the presents, gift giving, and of course the baking. This is the first year that I have been in charge with making all the goodie baskets, because if you guys don't know, my grandma is from German descent. She was born and raised in Germany, and up there you do goodie baskets for your children every single year. But of course, they are getting too old now, so the responsibility is put on me, and I am so honored. I really hope they like all my baking when the Christmas time does roll around, since it's like my favorite thing to do. I love cooking, baking, except why do ingredients have to be so expensive? It's like, you want to make something with ginger in it? Oh, you gotta buy a ginger root for like $5. It's like, I don't got $5 to throw away. But that's a whole other situation. Today we are going to be talking about bipolar disorder, the history behind it, symptoms, coping mechanisms, and all that fun stuff surrounding it, even though bipolar is not so much of a fun disorder to have. So bipolar disorder is essentially just a mood disorder where you can have extreme highs and extreme lows. So you can have supermania or major depression, and they go one in the same, depending on what you are diagnosed with. So with bipolar disorder, there are different diagnoses. It's not just one bipolar disorder. There are multiple different ones you can have. I know some people get confused with that, especially the older generation. I know that some people think that bipolar is just, oh, you're crazy. It's like, no, they're not crazy. They are just stuck with living with this disorder that sadly some of their brain chemicals are all out of whack. But basically, the different diagnoses that you can get, the first one that you can get is bipolar 1 disorder. This is classified as you need to have had at least one manic episode followed by a hypomanic or a major depressive episode within the last 6 months. Something else is that during these major depression episodes, there is a possible chance that you could get bipolar psychosis, which I will get into later, but it is a type of psychosis that you can fall into. The other bipolar classification that you can get diagnosed with is bipolar 2 disorder. Bipolar 2 kind of is like depression, but not exactly. So with bipolar 2, you've had to have had at least one major depressive episode or one hypermanic episode, but is not followed up with a manic episode. So this is essentially being down, depressed, feeling hopeless, all of that sad stuff, and you don't get the feelings of mania afterwards, which, you know, is actually really interesting to me because I think that just falls into depression, but I guess with bipolar, it's more mood swingy, so your changes within anger and sadness are more severe than just depression as a whole. The last one that is categorized in the DSM-5, I guess I should mention the DSM-5 is the psychology diagnosis textbook. It's like if you check off these check marks, like with bipolar disorder, say there's 12 things that you can check off. If you check off 5 or more of those things, you will be classified of having that disorder. So with bipolar 2 and bipolar 1, you would have to check off either like the mania, the depression, and the psychosis. Those would be like a couple symptoms. Of course, there's way more, which I'll get into when we do talk about the symptoms, but for now, we are just talking about the diagnosis. The last diagnosis that you can have is ironically not called bipolar. It's called cyclothymic disorder, and with cyclothymic disorder, this classifies as within the last 2 years, whether you are a teen or an adult, you have had one or many periods of hypomania symptoms and also periods of depression symptoms, though it is less severe than major depression. So I guess that is the difference or the disparity between depression and bipolar, is that it's not as bad, but it's pretty bad. But yeah, so with it's an interesting word to say. With cyclothymic disorder, this is where it is the most severe bipolar. This is where you get the lot of, oh, they're crazy, when they're not actually. They are just having major mood swings from back and forth between mania and hypomania and depression and just craziness. Cyclothymic disorder is the worst one to have, and it is also the hardest to treat. So yeah. Last but not least, I know I said that those were the only 3 classifications, but there are other health conditions or medical conditions that can lead to bipolar symptoms. This is, for example, bipolar being brought on by drug use or alcohol due to a certain medication, such as Cushing's disease, which is basically where your body will produce way too much cortisol. What would you like, Guinness? Do you want your opinion on cortisol? If you guys don't know, cortisol is a stress hormone that is released in your body by your adrenal glands, which does make sense how it could possibly give you bipolar symptoms, solely because the stress hormone can get you moving or very depressed depending on how your body reacts. Regardless though, bipolar 2 is the less severe as bipolar 1, because since you don't get those mania symptoms, it's, I guess, easier to tame. I don't want to say one is easier than the other. I do say though that bipolar 1 is harder to maintain, and that is solely due to the mood changes very frequently. So the thing is that with bipolar 1, you can have mania for longer periods of time, but the thing with bipolar 2 is that if you are diagnosed with bipolar 2, you will have very long depressive episodes, rather than bipolar 1, where it could switch, every few weeks, every few days, every few months, where bipolar 2 is you're kind of just in the constant state of depression, which causes significant impairment within your daily life. That's something that's common with every single diagnosis that you will get in your life, or anyone who deals with any mental disorder, is that it has to impair your daily life in order to be considered a mental disorder, because otherwise I guess you're considered normal to the lovely boomers out there. I'm just kidding. But no, every single mental disorder can be inhabilitating to anyone. At any point of their life. The good and I guess bad thing about bipolar disorder is that it is more likely to be diagnosed in later life. So if you don't have bipolar now, don't worry, because by the time you turn 18 to 25, you're at the highest risk of getting bipolar disorder as an early adult, which yay me, I'm 21 and my biological mother actually has bipolar. So there is a chance that I could become bipolar within the next 3 years, which is very interesting to think about, how, your brain can just change over time, or was it predetermined? Because I'll get into it later, but bipolar is, some genetics, some this, some that. But if it is genetics, it's crazy how the bipolar gene can stay stagnant until later life, because bipolar disorder is actually very rare in children and teens. It almost never happens. I do know there is a new disorder that has come out that I will talk about in a later episode, but that's borderline personality disorder. And I know for many years disorders, a lot of people would confuse that with bipolar, even though it is a completely different personality disorder. In fact, bipolar is a mood disorder and personality disorder is a personality disorder. So they're very different, but I guess they just got classified as the same for the longest time. But yes, so bipolar does not come until later life, and shockingly, for the first time, there is no difference between men and women getting bipolar. You are at equal chance this time, so let's go. Us women are at the same chance of getting it as a guy. But going on to some of the symptoms, since I have been saying mania, hypomania, depression, and all these fun stuff, I will describe them for you. Mania is a feeling of pure bliss, like it's like go, go, go. Think of your body on like 70 cups of caffeine, and that's essentially what mania is. You become an insomniac, you will be up for like weeks at a time, sometimes weeks, sometimes days, of course, depending on how severe your bipolar is. But with mania, you can get feelings of euphoria, which feelings of euphoria is like, I am the happiest I've ever been in my life. This is a point where most people with bipolar will do a lot of chores. It's the whole thing of digging out your house from underneath you and just rebuilding it because you just have so much time, and that's what like your thought processes is. This could also include racing thoughts, sporadic behavior, and also people who are in a manic state are abnormally upbeat and happy. Like they are jumpy. Think of someone on like crack, basically, just a little milder. That is what mania is. A good show that shows this side of mania is ironically the show Euphoria, which is one of the symptoms. The main character Rue, who is played by Zendaya, she has bipolar disorder, and I'm pretty sure it's in one of the later episodes in season 2 or 1. I think it's season 2. It shows how Rue could not sleep for a whole week because she wanted to figure this problem out, and she was all over the place. And then, of course, cut to the next scene where she can barely get out of bed or move. And they actually do talk about bipolar disorder in the episode and talk about the struggles with it and how it is very debilitating for people who actually have it in the real world. Going on with debilitating and following up with that depression, there is the hypomania, or the depression side. This is basically the same as major depression, just again a little less. You can barely get out of bed, you sleep a lot, you don't really want to eat, or you eat a lot. It's essentially the same feelings as depression, as it is known in bipolar disorder as a depressive episode. So think of major depression as you have depression all the time, where bipolar you have episodes of major depression. Bipolar 2 is the most common to major depression, except again, it comes in episodes. The feeling of that you might be okay kind of comes with bipolar, and a lot of people who actually have bipolar are most likely to go off their medication because of those mood swings. If you're in a manic episode, you're gonna feel like you don't need those pills anymore because you are better than that. You are on top of the world. So you'll stop taking them, which in turn makes your episodes way more severe. Like I said earlier, you can fall into psychosis, and bipolar psychosis is a thing. This is where you essentially break from reality. It mostly happens right after a manic episode or during a manic episode is where you can actually kind of go a little schizophrenic and hear voices or see hallucinations depending on how major the psychosis is. There is also a rare occurrence as well called mixed episodes. This involves high energy and high activity of mania. So this is the episode of where you have feelings of excitement and joy with the mania, but at the exact same time you feel hopeless and worthless at the exact same time. Now, I myself could not imagine how that could feel like, because I don't experience it personally, but I could not imagine being someone who is having a mixed episode. Like, I can't even fit myself into those shoes. I don't even want to know what that feels like, to be on top of the world yet feel like you are at the very bottom at the same time. It must be really hard to cope with. And if any of you guys have ever experienced a mixed episode or anything like that, please share your story with me, because I feel for you so bad. Like, I feel for you so much. I don't think myself I could deal with that. So, you are strong if you have to deal with that. This is also the most scary or the most risky type of episode that you can get. Dr. Marsh says this in one of his interviews, but he essentially says, I'm going to read it off of a prompt so that I am taking his direct quote and not saying it from my own words. He says, Dr. Marsh says that that's a really high risk situation because people are miserable and they have all this extra energy. These episodes are just as or more dangerous and life-threatening than severe mania. And Dr. Marsh says that if you are feeling like this, to seek immediate care, because, when you think of it that way, where you can do anything you ever want because you feel like you're on top of the world, but yet I could see it. I feel like that could lead to higher risks of suicide and very extreme risk-taking, wanting to live and not wanting to at the same time. Oh my goodness. So crazy to wrap your head around, really. But yeah, so that is basically all of the symptoms that you get with bipolar disorder. Of course, there are the offset ones or the offbeat ones. Everyone who has bipolar is different in their own way. And I think that's why within history, bipolar has kind of been shoved away or has been diagnosed as other things like, ADHD or depression solely because of that mood swing. It didn't go into the DSM-5 until 2013, which is actually the latest edition of the DSM-5. Well, actually, no, the latest edition is 2017, but the second latest edition was 2013, so it wasn't recognized until the 2000s. I really wonder what it was like back in the day. Again, I always, every episode, go back to the Salem witch trials and why witches were burned at the stake. I'm sure of it. It's because they had bipolar or something along those lines. Regardless, I bet most of you are wanting to know what are some of the causes and what can you do if you have it. So, of course, like any disorder, almost every disorder, genetics plays a huge role. If your mom or dad had it, you are most likely going to have it. That is why I am at the highest risk, because, again, the gene does run in my family, so it's a 50-50 chance if I am going to get it or not. I'm not sure if it follows the same thing as Huntington's disease. I'm pretty sure it's Huntington's, where if your grandparents have it, your parents won't, but the parents' kids will. So it's like every second generation. But with bipolar, I'm pretty sure every generation has the same % chance. Of course, bipolar can also be caused by your brain structure and functioning. You could be born with it, but again, it just might not show heavy until your early adulthood. Family history, again, genetics, family history, one in the own, but it's actually not specifically known. Like I said before, with Huntington's, how it's every 2 generations. Bipolar, there is no research on what specific pinpoint can determine it, essentially. It's just, luck of the draw to see if you get it or not. So if you struggle with bipolar, cross your fingers that your kid doesn't. The reason why children and teenagers aren't diagnosed with bipolar at a young age is because it tends to vary a lot more. And it is also the argument of, well, what's the difference between hormones and growing hormones rather than bipolar? Because if some of you may know, I am at fault for it. When I was growing up from ages 13 to 17, I was sporadic. I remember when, oh my goodness, it's so cringy to think about. I'm sorry, mom and dad, with how much of a brat I was growing up. From ages 13 to 15, I was probably the most rebellious kid you could ever see, but I was also the most depressed. So I think by ages 13 to 15, I was really, really depressed. I struggled with, the basics, self-harm, eating disorders, all that stuff. One day you would find me on top of the world, and the other day I would be crying in bed, wanting to die. And it wasn't until I was 16, 17, until I kind of started mellowing out. So I could see why doctors wouldn't diagnose you then, just because, Even I myself can admit that I was a pretty moody teenager. I've definitely slammed the door of my hometown house or of my childhood home way too many times over pointless arguments. Again, I'm sorry, Mom. But I feel like that's what every parent experiences with a teenager, is that you are gonna have a moody teenager, no matter how good you raise them. It just happens. And don't even get me started with women and how, periods. And, I feel bad for mothers. I know, especially if I ever had my own kid, I'd be terrified that my kid would come home pregnant. I don't know why. If I had a little girl, I'd be like, every single day, I'd be like, you better not be pregnant. Don't be pregnant. Please don't be pregnant. Not to say that teen pregnancies are a bad thing. It's just it does put a lot of stress on the whole family, and if it's not dealt with correctly, can lead to some very tragic incidents. But if your teenager or child is experiencing severe and dramatic mood swings from happy to depressive very often and commonly, then maybe it would be a good idea to go get a therapist session with a psychologist to figure out if that is actually what is going on. So I bet you may all want to know, what is the treatment that can be done with bipolar, and what can we do to at least make you stable enough to be able to function? Well, medication is the number one treatment for bipolar. These are also known as mood stabilizers, and one of the most common drug that is used is actually lithium, pure lithium, like the element, which is one of the best mood stabilizers out there. So these medications are believed to correct the balancing hormones within your brain. So bipolar disorder is actually also known as a chronic illness. So once you start taking medication, whether that is lithium or whatever your doctor prescribes you, you will have to most likely take it for the rest of your life. Because once you get off of that medication, the symptoms will come right back. So each person who has bipolar is different, and one mood stabilizer may not work for another person. Like lithium, it is seen in some cases that it does not work for certain people with bipolar, and so they have to move on to like a different medication. As well as sometimes medication might not even work. That is why the second best option is psychotherapy, which is essentially talk therapy. Talk it out. Essentially, it is like CBT, but instead of figuring it out yourself, you will talk to someone. Think of like a one-on-one therapy session. They are really helpful. Only issue with bipolar, and if you are a teenager or an early adult who has it, is that this mood stabilizer medications, or most of them, affect with birth control and pregnancy. If you are planning on getting pregnant, you do have to get off of the mood stabilizers, because it could potentially harm the baby with all the chemicals being pumped in, which, it makes me like think for a second, like I wonder if there is anyone out there who has had bipolar and had to go off their medication for pregnancy. I really wonder what it would be like, because I couldn't imagine pregnancy hormones as well as bipolar episodes. Oh my goodness. I salute you to anyone who has done that, because I could not imagine, especially even so, like, I am a birth control user. I've been on it for years. I couldn't imagine taking just getting off of that, because I have to take a new pill. But then again, it's like, what are you sacrificing? Are you sacrificing your libido for, a better mood? Like, I am pretty sure that would outweigh it, but I mean, I don't know. Everyone is different, right? So in some rare cases, especially if your bipolar is very severe, there is a new treatment therapy that has just came out. It is called ECT, or electroconvulsive therapy. It sounds terrifying. And actually, back in the day, it was also known as shock therapy, but there is a slight difference. So back in the day, shock therapy is essentially shocking the patient. Think of someone taking a taser to your brain and frying it to re-scramble the neurons. That is what shock therapy is. Shock therapy nowadays does mean something different than electroconvulsive therapy. There is the new type of shock therapy where this is what happens when you try and get people to not be scared of something anymore, to get over phobias. This is essentially called shock therapy, where you just put it in front of them. So if I am scared of spiders, that is like putting a tarantula on my face while I'm restrained. That is shock therapy. So with electroconvulsive therapy, this is where they stick little electrodes to your brain and they shoot little micro electro impulses into your brain. And it is essentially a controlled seizure. You are making your brain have a seizure. And the reason for this is to try and remodel the brain signals, which is so interesting how just a little electricity can completely rewire your brain. Kind of straying off topic, but on the similar thing that we're talking about right now, it is known, and a lot of brain surgeons, researchers have shown this, is that if you touch certain parts of your brain, you can do certain things. I'm pretty sure there was a case, I don't know if Grey's Anatomy talked about it or it was one of those medical shows where it is essentially the reason why people who have open brain surgery are awake during the whole procedure is to make sure that they do not lose their speech or musical talent. I'm pretty sure it was Grey's Anatomy where the girl was a guitarist or a singer or something like that. No, she was a guitarist and she had to play the guitar while she was doing brain therapy to make sure that she didn't lose it, because I think there's like 7 types, there's 7 parts of your brain. Like there's your linguistics, which is your speaking, there's your mathematical side, your musical side, your sports side, or like your balancing side, your creative side. There's many different sides, and during brain surgery there is a lot of different risks. There's also been very, very extreme rare cases where during this open brain surgery, people have talked different languages when they have never even spoken it before. I think the case was the person who has never spoken French could speak fluently during the brain surgery when they pushed on a certain neuron, which is so interesting. The fact that this is like in our subconscious, or at least deep down in certain parts of our brain, because like, I know this is like controversial maybe, or like a conspiracy theory to myself, but I truly believe that your brain, like if you have heard a language before, like even in passing, like let's say you're in Mexico and you hear a bunch of Spanish, right? Of course you don't know how to speak Spanish, you have no idea what they're saying, but I am convinced that there's like neurons in your brain that we could unlock and find them, that we would be able to speak every language. Like there has to be a way that our brain could understand that to at least a certain point, especially if there's cases like this during brain surgery. Going back to electroconvulsive therapy though, it's so interesting that you can just cure someone's depression. I know that there is a rare surgery for eating disorders, which I'm going to talk about in full during my eating disorder episode, but essentially it is a brain surgery that you can have that will make you stop fearing food, but it is at risk that you will no longer feel love. Again, another show has shown this, but it is an actual thing where if you remove that part of the brain that indicates hunger, you're also removing a part to not feel love. And to not feel love is very hard because I know a lot of humans are empathetic to a lot of humans. I mean, that's in our nature. So you kind of just lose all of that ability. But going on about seizures, it's really crazy how, there is a lot of people in this world, and a lot of kids, dogs, any animal in this world could be prone to seizures. I know with tics or Tourette syndrome, the whole reason why you tic and everything is from seizures. There's different kinds. There's absent seizures where it's kind of like where the person is gone and they don't really respond. There's also the major seizures where a lot of people commonly know in Hollywood and all that stuff is where there is someone on the floor violently shaking. Also, if you are prone to this myth, do not stick your fingers in someone's mouth who is seizing if they are having a seizure. I know it is a common myth that some people think that they will choke on their tongue, and that is just not possible. You cannot choke on your tongue during a seizure episode, and if you try and put your fingers while someone is seething, you're most likely going to get your finger bit off. If someone is seizing and you don't know what to do or you don't have the training, essentially all you do is try and lean them on their side if they have fallen down. If they're sitting up, don't try and restrain them, but if they are really violently shaking, you should to a little bit just so they don't hurt themselves. But if someone, this has actually happened to me at my old job, shout out to my old coworker, who, it wasn't necessarily a seizure, but it kind of was. It was a low blood sugar induced seizure. If you guys don't know, if your blood sugars drop very fast, you can faint and seize sometimes. And I remember this clear as day. I was working, it was 3 p.m. and I was up in the break room with my friend for 15 minutes and we were just chatting, and I remember specifically that I was trying to log into my Snapchat again because I got kicked out for some reason, so I was panicking trying to log back in, and sure enough, right beside me I hear the glass break and my friend is on the floor twitching out between the chairs, and I was like, oh my god. Thank goodness I sprung into action, and so did one of my other coworkers, since I have worked with the Abilities Council and people with disabilities. I do have seizure training. So if you guys ever come into that situation where my friend is, if they are on the floor twitching and seizing, you are supposed to put your hand under their head unless you have a pillow or something else so that they don't bash their head repeatedly. Make sure that they are on the side, essentially the fetal position, and just monitor them and hope that they are okay. It is a it's a common fact to know that if they are out longer than 2 minutes, that you need to call an ambulance immediately, because that could possibly lead to brain damage. If they're out for more than 5 minutes, you better hope that the ambulance is already there, because that signifies severe brain damage. Yes, there is cases where people do go into long periods of seizing and nothing ever happens. That is just the worry that you should have. If you do run into someone who is seizing, that is essentially the guideline you should follow. Thank goodness my friend is okay. He just did not eat that much sugar that day. He drank some orange juice. He was fine. Thank goodness. But yes, sometimes it can be way worse than that. But back to electroconvulsion therapy, and back to this whole reason why we started talking about it. It is crazy to think that the whole reason why bipolar is a disorder is because of the wrong chemical misfiring of your brain, and so you just take some little electrodes and just rewire your brain. I really wonder if ethics and morals weren't a thing in experimenting, that if you could try and use electrotherapy to try and unlock other talents. I mean, that'd be very cool if I could just all of a sudden pull up and play like the ukulele or something. That'd be cool. So, since bipolar disorder is one of the most damning on your daily life, it is known that family members of people with bipolar disorder should get their own therapy. They should go to support groups, they should go to talk therapy, and just learn strategies as a whole for coping with it, because bipolar disorder is very hard on families, especially if you have a child who 1 week is all frantic, upbeat, and erratic, to a point where your kid can barely get out of bed, like Guinness over there, who's just lays in bed and sleeps all day. Nice one, Guinness. Thank you for doing this while we're talking about if you guys don't know, she is cleaning herself in the background if you are not watching the video and just listening to me. So I guess that's her takes on bipolar disorder. Come on, you could at least be a little more caring, okay? How could she, One of the last treatments that you can do it's not scientifically proven to work, but there is some people who have bipolar who have claimed that this has helped them. So if you're out of options, you can try it. That is acupuncture. If you don't know what acupuncture is, it is if you've ever seen Final Destination, There's a reason why I will never do acupuncture myself, but it is where it is, I'm pretty sure it's little needles that has like some sort of like numbing medicine, or it's like some sort of medicine. I'm sorry, I didn't do much research into it. And you stick it at different pinpoints on your body. I know there's some on your wrist, can be on your face. It depends what you're trying to heal. I know a lot of people claim that acupuncture is really good for migraines, it's really good for stress relief. But if any people have watched Final Destination, you'll know that there is a scene where the girl has needles all over and she tries to reach for something and she falls over and they all stab her, and oh my goodness, that is the only reason why I've never done acupuncture. If anyone does know any good acupuncture people and you swear that it is good, maybe I'll get over it. But for right now in my life, I will stay away. But again, if you are someone who struggles with bipolar, or heck, even if I get it, let's say in a couple years from now, because I still am at risk for it, maybe then I will try acupuncture. And of course, this isn't a specific treatment, but it helps with any disorder or any diet or journaling. Changing your diet can help you a lot because your gut is related to your mental health. They are like one in one. The healthier you eat, the better you feel. The more gross you eat, the worse you feel, which is so interesting, and I maybe might do an episode on it if you guys want. But I really want to get into the whole thing of why does sugary food and fast food taste so good and we crave it all the time, but then when we actually eat it, we feel like garbage. But then if you like think of like an apple or like spinach or something, we don't crave that. But yet when we eat it, we technically feel better. It's so crazy how your brain and mine are linked like that. Something I do want to add to that is that I did go on a diet when I was younger. I don't know if I've said this previously, but I did go on a diet with my mom when I was like, oh my goodness, 16, and I did not have fast food for like a month and a half. And I remember going to McDonald's one day with my friends in high school, and I had like a McDouble. It was the grossest thing I've ever tasted in my life. But you know what's the funniest part? Is that when I went back next time, I was craving it, even though I knew how gross it tasted. And like, I could get into the whole thing of economics and how huge companies like McDonald's or Tim Hortons uses like cheap fillers and the cheapest ingredients, but yet pumps them with like MSG and fillers so that it tastes good to us. Like, it's almost edible garbage, but maybe that's something we talk about in another episode. So something I want to dive into about bipolar, about myself, is that for about 2 years, I thought I had bipolar disorder until I was sadly mistaken to realize that, oh, it's most likely ADHD that I have. I would go on these crazy cleaning spurts and this huge mania where I'd be up for days and not be able to sleep because I just had so much on my mind. And I was like, I wonder if I have bipolar. I'm pretty sure I was like 18. I was like, I'm pretty sure I have bipolar. Like, I am just so erratic all the time. And then I fell into a huge depression. Some of you guys don't know, but my first year of university was one of the worst years of my life. I was at my absolute lowest. Again, you can call it a quarter life crisis if you want. But I really struggled getting out of bed. Like, so this may sound a little entitled, and I'm very sorry if it does, but even though I struggled when I was 13 to 15 with depression and stuff, I never really struggled with mental health that much growing up, other than an eating disorder, which again I will talk about in the eating disorder episode. So I didn't really struggle with depression, anxiety, anything like that. I would say I was most likely baseline. Like, I could do public speaking, I could get out of bed, I would do stuff, and I've never had anything that hindered my work. So I never understood, like, don't get me wrong, when I was in high school, I've probably said that I was depressed, depressed AF type of thing, when in reality I was probably just, having a bad day, or I was just sad. But my first year of university, my first year moving away from home and everything, it my depression got so bad, and I didn't realize how debilitating it was until it started affecting me, until I was like in it, to realize like, wow, this was bad. And it's funny because even when I was in it, like at the peak of my depression, well, it's not depression at the time, it was adjustment disorder that caused the depression symptoms. It's crazy because you don't even notice that your life is falling apart. You're just kind of trying to hang on to something. For me, in my dorm room, so I was in a dorm, I feel so bad for my roommate. If my roommate is watching this, which she probably isn't, she probably hates me, I'm so sorry. Like, I left her so confused, because one day I was there and the next day I just moved out, so I'm sorry. But anyways, what happened is I wasn't able to get out of bed for anything. I missed almost 100% of my classes for like a good 2 months. I missed all of my classes. I even remember I was trying so hard to figure out, like, if I had depression, that I would make doctor's appointments with the school campus doctor, and I would completely forget to show up. It's crazy how clouded your brain gets when you have a mental disorder. Like, I forgot, and it wasn't even just like, oh, I'm not gonna go. You blank everything. You forget that you have appointments. You forget that you have things to do. I remember it got so bad I didn't shower for oh my god, 3 weeks. I didn't even move out of my bed, I don't think. I probably was gonna get bed sores if I didn't do something about it. I do have to thank my family who was there for me at the time. But yeah, that was one of the most debilitating things in my whole life. So I couldn't imagine with bipolar to have those feelings and then the next day to wake up and feel like you could conquer the world. The issue with bipolar and mania, and some people, I know I've heard some of my friends say that they've wanted bipolar because at least they'd get shit done, and I do not believe that for a second, because I don't think mania is a good thing. I think it is more damning than it is good. And the reason for that is because when you are in mania, you do more risk-taking behavior. This is where people will spend their life savings on stuff. It depends what your mania wants you to do. Do you want to clean the whole house? Do you want to go jump off a building? Do you want to take hard drugs? Do you want to go on a shopping spree where you have no money left? Do you want to make a foolish investment? Do you want to go, hook up with 10 guys? That's the thing with mania. You feel like you are invincible. So I couldn't imagine, I can imagine if I felt invincible, I would probably want to go, take meth, because, you know what? Meth can't affect me, so I'm gonna go do it. And that's how you can ruin your life. Or, oh my gosh, I'm gonna buy this brand new Lamborghini for $500,000 that I don't have, but let's put a 20-year down payment on it where it will absolutely tear apart my bank account. That is essentially what mania is. So do not think of mania as something as, oh, you just get stuff done. No, it is bad, and a lot of people argue that mania is worse than depression, just in a completely extreme other way, because at least when you're in the depressive episode, you are stagnant, you are there. And that's why mixed episodes are the worst, because if you're there and not there, I couldn't imagine what you would do if you felt on top of the world and at the bottom. I know I already said that, but it's very hard to wrap your head around, really. Some other facts about bipolar is that people with bipolar disorder are 20% more likely to commit suicide than any other disorder. For 1 in every 100 people are bipolar, so that's not as common as depression or anxiety or anything like that, but it is still pretty common. And a lot of people who do struggle with bipolar disorder have the most struggles with substance abuse as well as alcoholism, solely because a lot of people do find comfort in drugs and alcohol because, that's what they're there for, even though if that's not what they're intended to do, Also, a fun fact, not really fun fact, I guess, for bipolar, is that one of the section in the brain with brain functioning and everything, it's your hippocampus on your left side is actually bigger in bipolar patients than in normal patients, which I think is pretty crazy. The fact that there is a actual thing about your brain being a different size. like, I really wonder, like, why that would, like, even work, you know? It's crazy. Also, people with bipolar disorder are most likely to get triggered. And I know a lot of people hate the word triggered because it's so overused in social media nowadays. It's like, oh, I'm so triggered by you. I'm so triggered this, triggered that. But the thing with triggers is that bipolar, there is actually certain things that can trigger a manic episode or a depressive episode, depending on what that is. So at least one good thing that can come with bipolar disorder and everything is that this disorder is very manageable and very treatable, to the point where if you are taking your medication properly, you should reduce all of the effects of bipolar. There is some psychologists that even say, and some doctors, that people who experience suicide with bipolar disorder can reduce it as so much as 7-fold, which basically means you will no longer have any suicidal thoughts. And there are some cases where if you do take the prescription for long enough, you may no longer have any more symptoms of bipolar at all, as long as you're taking medication, which is always a risk factor, because I know I've heard this so many times between my friends, family, literally almost everyone I know has done this, and you've probably done it too, where you finally start to feel better, whether that's depression, whatever it is. You've been taking the medication for a couple months now, and you start to feel better. A lot of people fall into the thing of, oh, well, I feel better, I no longer have to take the medication. When in reality, and in most case scenarios, it's the medication that's making you feel better. I had a friend growing up who had severe depression. She was on heavy doses of depression medication. And I remember she would be like okay for like a couple of weeks. And then she would tell me that like, oh, I'm no longer, like, I'm cutting cold turkey off my medication because I feel better and I don't need it anymore, just for her to relapse in a week and, you know, severely self-harm and get severely suicidal again, solely because she cut her medication cold turkey. Especially with bipolar, I couldn't imagine cutting off your like mood stabilizers to go erratic again, but a lot of people with bipolar are at risk for doing that. Regardless, that leads us to pretty much the end of bipolar disorder. There isn't much to say about it really, other than it's not really depicted in Hollywood or in any of today's mainstream like movies or social media. It is not really talked about at all. Before this podcast or before I went to university, I don't think I even really knew what bipolar was. You kind of just know, you know, anxiety and depression, but like, that's it. Like I said, my biological mother has bipolar disorder, but I can't speak much about it because I've never met her. I don't know what her symptoms was other than from my dad, who, again, just said that she was crazy, which, you know, we'll see to what extent she was crazy or if it was just, you know, her not taking medication. Yeah, so that is basically bipolar disorder. If you or a loved one are suffering or dealing with it, I really hope this podcast helped you at least maybe try some new things out, maybe give you a chance to take some medication. I know a lot of people don't like to be medicated. I personally don't like being medicated. That is because for two reasons. One, I do kind of believe that medication is meant to kind of just numb the thing that's there. But I do have to disagree today, and I have to disagree with mood disorders. If you have a specific mood disorder, yes, you should probably be medicated because it will correct your mood. But I am not big on medication for like ADHD or medication for... No, actually just ADHD. I don't like the medication for it. I will go on to talk about that in the next episode, about the wonderful joys of ADHD and medication and how kids are just like taking this medication to just be numb enough so that their parents can cope with them. I don't believe that. I believe that some medication is pretty bad for your health, especially for developmental health. But like I said, we'll get into that in the next episode. But for now, we'll leave you with this fun fact. Did you know that listening to music when you study can help you out by as much as 80% of studying? And because listening to music activates certain parts in your brain, that helps you focus. So you can take this two ways. You can either, if you are a person who likes to listen to music while you study, that's great. But you also need to take into account that your brain sucks at multitasking. In fact, it is arguably enough, there is arguably enough evidence that your brain, no one can actually multitask. So if you listen to rap or if you listen to music with a bunch of words in it, you are actually, you're making it worse for yourself to study than if you were to not listen to music at all. If you want to listen to music while you are studying, make sure to, so a trick that I learned, and thank you, my first year psychology teacher, for teaching me this, but listen to video game music. If you are a gamer and like, let's say Fallout 4 or Legend of Zelda or Pokemon, anything open world that has that amazing music that just keep you immersed, Skyrim is the most popular one. I absolutely love the music there. It is said, or at least this is what I do, and it is kind of proven, is that if you are doing homework or just something light that you're trying to catch up on stuff, listen to the music that would play in an open world. So if you're just like sauntering along the hills of Legend of Zelda or something, listen to that kind of music. But if you have a deadline that you have to meet and that you're writing an essay and you are frantically trying to get down a bunch of stuff in a certain amount of time because, maybe you left that essay for an hour before it is due at 11:59 p.m., listen to boss battle music. It is scientifically proven that boss battle music will engage parts of your brain that will make you say, go, 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 go. I know myself, I would listen to Bowser music. From Mario 64, I would listen to the Bowser's boss theme songs when I had to do my essays, and it works. It surprisingly works, because something your brain does, again, back to the multitasking thing, is that we're not actually good at multitasking, but your brain will take that music and basically activate whatever it does, and it makes you write longer, and it makes you, I guess, put in more effort. While as the open world music makes you kind of calm and like flowy, and it just keeps you attentive, because I'm pretty sure any of you guys who have played any open world game, I think it would be pretty boring if there was no background music at all, So I couldn't imagine at all. Regardless, on the next episode of JJ Time, we will be talking about ADHD. This disorder will most likely be my longest episode because I have so much to talk about it. I have so much experience with people in my life who have ADHD, my own experiences with the drugs, because if you guys don't know, ADHD medication is also a huge study drug problem that's going on in universities and everything. So if you guys want to hear that, tune in to the next episode. But with that being said, guys, I hope you liked today's podcast. If you are listening on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, iHeartRadio, wherever you are listening, please leave a like or 5 stars. Write a nice little review if you have the option. And you know what? Comment something. Let's say today, what's your favorite food? What is your favorite food? Mine is spaghetti. I am an absolute sucker for spaghetti. And I know it's pretty plain and simple, but that's just who I am. Plain and simple, Tomato sauce on some lovely noodles taste amazing. But again, you guys, thank you so much for listening to me this week, and I hope you guys are staying cozy and warm. I know Christmas is around the corner, like I said at the beginning of the stream, or at the beginning of the podcast. So I hope you guys are staying warm and cozy. Maybe buy yourself some fuzzy socks. If you don't own a pair, trust me, fuzzy socks on a winter day with a nice mug of hot chocolate and the mini marshmallows. Oh, It doesn't get better than that, I promise. Regardless, guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Whichever day you're having, I hope you are having a good one. And if you are having a bad day, make sure to find at least 5 minutes of your time to do some little self-care that can make your day just a minuscule better. I will leave you with this wonderful quote. Don't save the good wine for a good day. Good wine is wasted on a good day. On a good day, all wine is good wine. Bad wine even is good wine. Drink the good wine on a bad day. That's what it's there for. Interpret it that however you want, but with that being said, guys, I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!